I'm Owen Covington, Director of the Elon University News Bureau. I'm here with Megan Squire, Professor of Computer Science. Dr. Squire recently published a piece looking at the ways that online extremists are using social media platforms and the efforts to track them and clamp down on that type of activity. You argue that it's increasingly challenged because a lot of folks, extremists that use these platforms are pretty nimble, and the efforts to track them and keep them from the platforms are sort of reactionary as opposed to being proactive. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so some of this reminds me of battles we have in the cybersecurity industry with criminals or that kind of thing. There's a bad guy and sort of a good guy, and you're hoping to catch the bad guy before something tragic happens. Unfortunately, we're always a little bit behind, and so in cybersecurity, we say the defender has to be right 100% of the time, but the attacker only has to be right once. And it reminds me a lot of what's happening in social media with extremists using the platforms to organize, recruit, train, sometimes incite violence. So the platforms have a big challenge because there's speech issues at play, right?
Right.
But there's also public safety issues. And so my point in this piece was to argue expertise. Some of the things that we could do don't even need to approach free speech issues at all. It's just simple knowledge of how the extremists are using their platforms and kind of gaming the system. So.
Gotcha. In the article, which was for the Brookings Institute, you say that there needs to be more expertise and a better understanding by the platforms themselves as well as legislators if they're really going to have an impact on this.
Yeah, I mean, the platforms, I think it's pretty obvious. There are ways that they're being gamed right now, especially in the smaller, less known people and groups, but which can sometimes be the more dangerous groups. So I think there is a little bit of a lack of expertise there. I'm not sure there's the wherewithal either inside those companies sometimes to study this systematically. Their mission is not to understand extremism. Their mission is to make money for their shareholders. So, but letting researchers in would be a great idea for them, so that we can tell them, hey, here's what's going on your platform. And then from a lawmaking, sort of policy-making side, I still think that in this day and age there is a bit of lack of understanding of how the internet works. I think some of the policies that have been proposed are pretty far-fetched, maybe not so effective. So yeah, some expertise there, I think, that's always needed. So.
And transparency is an issue here as well.
Yeah, I mean, the companies don't want to admit what's going on the platforms because then they're worried that they're going to look bad or they might be complicit or that something went wrong. They did something wrong, right? So they're kind of going to lock down. And then from a policymaking standpoint, there might be a lack of will to go after some of the groups for political reasons. We're kind of a fraught climate right now, and so there's a lot of blaming both sides narratives and things like that. So it's just kind of a prickly situation.
Gotcha.
It's not good.
Are you optimistic that there will be a good solution proposed and put in place?
It's really going to come down to what the social media companies decide to do and how much stonewalling they do versus how much they admit that there's a problem and then start tackling solutions. So unfortunately, I don't think they're there yet. Even yesterday, a bunch of funders that had given money to researchers to study Facebook had to threaten Facebook, if you don't give them the data, we're going to pull the funding. And so it's just really fraught right now. It's not looking good, but I hold out hope. Maybe we'll get there.
Well, thanks so much for coming to talk with me.
No problem. My pleasure.